right, Sarah, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll just intro the event here. Thanks to everybody here in person and online. I'll introduce myself and just say a few things about our space here and about the author who's joining us. My name is Nate Bauer. I'm the director of the University of Alaska Press. Welcome again to the UAF Summer Sessions and University of Alaska Press Authors Corner. Thanks to those of you here at UAF's Engineering, Learning, and Innovation Facility for choosing to spend part of another magnificent summer week with us here in Fairbanks. A little smoky earlier today, but it's mostly cleared up now, and it's really terrific weather. It's a little hot, but feels good to have the sun on you. Because it's important, I want to be clear that the University of Alaska Fairbanks still adheres to a strict COVID-19 policy requiring face coverings and social distancing inside all buildings for anyone who is not fully vaccinated. Please just get vaccinated. Those of you who are tuning in, thanks to tuning into the live stream or the video recording later on from Alaska or from anywhere else. Thanks for your attention and your interest. And thanks to the University of Alaska Office of Information Technology. Thanks to Scott and to JC for making this happen tech-wise. Big thanks to Michelle Bartlett and Summer Sessions for organizing these fun and stimulating summer events series free of charge. Thanks to tonight's presenter, Sara Ryan, and all of our UA Press authors for agreeing to participate in this reading and the Authors Corner series this summer. I hope you will make it worth their while. We have books for sale after Sarah's talk out in the lobby area. If you're watching or listening to the stream, you can find more information and a purchase link for Sarah's book, I Thought There Would Be More Wolves, at the UA Press website, alaska.edu/UA Press. I think we will have some good time for questions at the end of Sarah's talk, so please consider any information and details you'd like to hear more about as you listen to her tonight. We have a microphone here in the room that we'll be happy to bring to you for any questions here in person, and which we'll kindly ask you to use for the benefit of the presenter and for those listening online. For anyone zooming in, please use the Google form link on the live stream page below the video pane that you're watching right now currently, or visit bit.ly, bit.ly/author Q&A, no spaces. I also hope that while you're at the summer session site, you'll consult the calendar for the rest of the summer and make plans to attend any other events that interest you. We'll post the rest of the scheduled Authors Corner presentations at the conclusion of tonight's event. Other events this week include Pete Dillon of the Tanana Valley Clinic for the Healthy Living series on Tuesday, Trails Advocate Stand Justice for the Discover Alaska series on Wednesdays here in the room, and Dry Cabin String Band for music in the garden on Thursday. Sara Ryan is a poet and a student living in Lubbock, Texas, where she is pursuing her PhD in creative writing. She received her MFA at Northern Michigan University and her BA in creative writing at University of Miami. She's been nominated for a Pushcart Prize as well as Best of the Net. She was a Best of the Net finalist in 2016. Her first chapbook, Never Leave the Foot of an Animal Unskinned, was published by Porkbelly Press, I love that name, in 2018. Her second chapbook, Excellent Evidence of Human Activity, was published by The Cupboard Pamphlet in 2019. She was the winner of Grist Journal's 2018 Pro Forma Contest and Cutbank's Big Sky Small Prose Contest. Her first full-length collection, I Thought There Would Be More Wolves, won the 2020 Permafrost Poetry Book Prize and was published by us, by the University of Alaska Press this February. Please join me in welcoming Sara Ryan.
All right, thank you so much, Nate. And thanks to everybody for putting on these summer sessions and for inviting me. My book came out during like peak pandemic, and I was also taking my qualifying exams in my PhD program. So it was a very chaotic time for me to have a book come out. So I'm excited to be able to read from it today and have some people hear some of my poems. So I'll talk a little bit about the book first, as well as a little bit of kind of my ideas behind it, and kind of the inspiration that drives the book. And then I'll read from the book for about 20 minutes or so. And then, as Nate said, I'll leave plenty of time for questions. I'm just going to start a little timer just so make sure I don't go over. But I thought I would talk a little bit about the book first. Nate mentioned that I got my MFA at Northern Michigan University, which I think echoes Fairbanks/Alaska in a really interesting way. A lot of people I know from Northern Michigan were Alaska residents at one point. So there's a lot of crossover there. But I moved there from Miami, Florida. Even though I was from Michigan initially, I was not the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so when I was there for 3 years for my MFA program, I encountered a lot of isolation paired with obviously a lot of inspiration from the natural world, the kind of raw wildness of the land. I lived, 2 blocks away from Lake Superior in a 100-year-old house. And while I loved the place around me, the animals that lived there, I found myself very lonely in this very isolated place, a town of 20,000 people, very far away from home and my family. My parents lived in California at the time, and my sister lived in Detroit, which is still an 8-hour drive from the Upper Peninsula. So that's kind of where this book came about. It's very much about kind of encountering that loneliness, searching for a place in a place that was very wild, in a lot of ways unwelcoming, even though I found myself very drawn to those unwelcoming spaces, the kind of wild places, the dark forests, the deep, deep lake. And so that's what this book is really encountering. It's encountering isolation, loneliness, but also what it means to be a woman and to survive in a place that, feels very rugged, very masculine, very kind of hunted land. And so I really was trying to encounter that with these poems. The poems are split into 4 sections, which each begin with a wolf question. Obviously, the kind of comparison between the woman and the wolf is something that goes back to, native lore. And I found myself kind of searching for wolves in the Upper Peninsula. They lived, on Isle Royal, which is, a national park where they're protected, but I never saw one. I had friends who would see them in the middle of the road, in the middle of the night on a remote, street in Marquette, Michigan, but I never saw one. And so kind of this expectation that I had going to this beautiful wild place, expecting to be welcomed by it, to be kind of coddled by it in a lot of ways, ended up not being my experience, even though I loved so much of it anyway. So each section begins with a wolf question, which is a linked poem that's spread across the 4 sections. A lot of my own work in my PhD program surrounds hybridity. As you heard Nate say, I do write some prose and some flash nonfiction. I recently wrote a book-length essay that I'm currently kind of shopping around. And while this book is very much a traditional book of poetry, it does challenge form in a lot of different places, with the linked poems at the beginning of each section, as well as a longer kind of hybrid prose poem / lyric essay that's in the middle of the book, a poem that is a self-erasure, a poem that begins as a poem and then erases itself as it's written, a contrapuntal, and some kind of other hybrid leanings that I feel like is really present in the book, despite its seemingly very poetry appearance. So I just kind of wanted to preface, I guess, with some of that explanation, just so that you guys are thinking about place and how it really kind of drives my work. And obviously, I think we all have places that have made their marks on us, whether good or bad. And that's really something that drives this book. So I'll begin and read some poems from the book. I'll also read the longer kind of lyric essay that's in the middle of it because I have some time, which is not always a luxury given, especially to a poet, poetry reading. So I'll begin with this poem that's at the beginning of the book, It prefaces the first section, and it's called Self-Portrait as Mammal. I have been lost for some time now. The hunt has been long and cold, and maybe it has all been for nothing. Listen, my cat and I sleep back to back like two mirrored moons. This is how I learned my body's soft groan, its clumsy bones growing heavier each night. This is when fur tangles and emerges from my mouth like a wolf. It is something familiar. I call it beast and it grows teeth. Somehow, the only thing I fear is the dull knock of my heart, its dangerous call into the wild. To quench its cry, I undress and redress and undress again in front of the window, like the whole world can see me. I glow like lamplight, like some tropical and unnamed creature, feathered and clawed, foul or forked tongue. What would it take to be an assassin of my body's claim to blood and pain? I wish I could be as flashy as the waterfall, as Niagara's roar. It spills and does not stop, even when engineers divert the water and it becomes a drizzle, even when a bird flies into the rush, even when I shiver in the mist, lean into the spray. So I will break into the first section of the book now. And I'll read the title poem, which is called I Thought There Would Be More Wolves. So there are some prose poems throughout the piece as well, and this is one of those. I thought there would be more wolves, here at the dumb stroke of midnight, in the glass dome of roses, the woods at the end of the lake. I was taught where to wait patiently, to fold my hands on my lap like two sorry doves, to tie my shoes in knots too tight to unravel. It's incredible how the oceans meet and trade salinity, how carbonation stings our throats, but we keep drinking. I was never a wolf, but a girl with a red brick house, a girl with a bicycle made of puzzle pieces. I wasn't a deer, I wasn't a lamb. All my wars with concrete were over. I'm driving alone to everywhere I'm going. I can't strip my skin away, my fur, my wolf teeth, yellow and dull. This next poem is called Nesting Material. And this poem, you can really kind of see how place very much dictated how I was feeling or feeling a sense of belonging or not belonging in the various places I lived over a span of time. The book also deals a lot with childhood and kind of growing up and moving around a lot. I grew up in Illinois, I moved to Michigan, I moved to Florida, moved to California, I moved back to Michigan, and now I'm in Texas. And my parents live in Canada now. So I've kind of lived all over the place. And when that happens, you kind of find that you return to places, but they never really feel like home anymore. And you begin to kind of wonder what home really is. I go back to my parents' house and I don't have a childhood bedroom. I have a room that has some of my things in it and it's just a guest room. And so a lot of the book kind of deals with that as well, kind of tracing my family's history and how it's moved and shifted and how the definition has kind of changed. So this poem is called Nesting Material. When I was a girl from Michigan, my father's feelings were hurt. Every man I met followed me home. I climbed yellow heaps of hay as though they were mountains. Maybe I was a girl from Illinois and I knew it all along. The city and trains I claimed as mine, the endless farms, the shopping malls. But maybe I knew Florida better than I thought. The blue water there, sun somehow hotter. In bed, I sleep and I am underwater. I watch a man jump from a bridge and he doesn't even scream. I am from underneath. I dig deeper and piles of dust rise around me. When I was a girl from nowhere, when I was a girl, when I was. This next poem is called A Man Tells Me How Difficult My Body Is. And this poem is the poem that erases itself. as it goes. Again, the UP was a very beautiful place, but it also was a place that was very hard to be a woman in, and I felt that very constantly, especially as a person who was kind of living there alone and didn't have a lot of connections while I was there, other than the university, and so I had a couple of unpleasant interactions as a person who worked at the front desk of a hotel, or a person who worked retail on like the main strip of downtown. And this is kind of about that experience. A man tells me how difficult my body is to look at, to stitch and pull into all the beautiful shapes he can imagine. He tells me I am a nest of bees, a dust storm, a dead owl, taking up so much space with my skin and limbs. He must be an enthusiast of the female body. He must know the tightness of metal on my back. He breathes near me and says, "What a struggle your body must be." And his words are liquid steel, slippery as beetles. The bluffs on the north edge of the town are black and jagged. The walleyes swarm in the deep, clear water. This is the biggest lake, the largest sea of ice. It is an excellent customer of space, of taking ships and people and trees and roads and swallowing them whole. I want to tell the man that no one has touched me for 3 years. Maybe this is a lie. Maybe this is the struggle he speaks of. Maybe he looks at my neck like Lake Superior looks at boats made of wood and men. I know I am obvious. I know I am not small or easy to throw from a dock. To look at, imagine the shapes, a nest of bees, dust storm, owl, my skin, an enthusiast, metal, a beetle struggling, liquid and jagged, a swarm of space and water, swallowed whole, no one, a lie, a struggle again, my neck, obvious, I am not easy. And so jumping into the next section of the book, again, the sections kind of represent kind of my move towards acceptance that this place was a difficult place to live in, but that it did make a mark on me and that it did matter to me when I lived there, and that it did change who I was as a woman, as a poet, as a person who appreciated the land and the animals and the place around me. And so the 4 sections kind of lead me towards that acceptance. And again, the wolf questions are all kind of linked. And so I thought I would read one of them to kind of show you this conversation between the wolf and the girl, and kind of how that continues throughout the book. This also began for me Googling a question about a wolf, and one of the suggested answers or the suggested questions that came up was, what sound does a wolf make when it is happy? Because people associate the howling kind of with this sorrow, with this hollow kind of emptiness, even though it's this way to communicate. And so that's something that really drove this linked poem as well. Wolf question. She grows thin and howls in search of something. 60% of wolf pups die. Every wild wolf has already survived a coldness, an empty den and the bodies of brothers turning to ice. Every wolf mother forced to notice the not there of her family. She can't imagine how it feels to hoard a big painful nothing and hope it will live. The girl survives in the woods, broken bones and fractures. She survives on Isle Royale. 15 miles inland, she shovels her car out of her driveway. This next poem is about my dad. My second year in the UP, I took the opportunity to take a circle tour, which is basically when you drive in a circle around Lake Michigan. And so I took an adapted circle tour where I drove to all of the cemeteries where my extended family members were buried. My family is not a family that visits cemeteries. So I went on this journey to kind of reconnect with my family's roots, their connections to place, and especially the Midwest. And I visited the town that my father used to visit when he was young, a young boy living in Chicago, which is Michigan City, Indiana. It's a tiny, tiny part of Indiana that touches Lake Michigan, in between Michigan and Illinois. Yeah, and I drove by the house his grandmother used to live in and visited his mother's grave, who I'm named after. So this is kind of about that. This is called Mapping My Father. Mapping my father and the houses he has lived in, the grave where his mother is buried, the grave that someday looks like my own. At the greenhouse, my father's ghost throws rocks at the brick wall of the storage facility next door. The train tracks run down the center of the street. He places pennies under the wheels as they burn by in a crash of metal. This home at the end of the lake, where the water stops and says, look. The truth doesn't always hurt. Sometimes the town is just the town. The siding is painted green and it breaks my father's heart. Sometimes the flowers in the cemetery and the graves are dead and it doesn't feel like anything. I forgive all these things. I forgive the broken air conditioning, the loneliness that feels round as an egg. I forgive my father too, for his discolored smile, all the ways he tore me down to bone and built me up again in blood and light, for catching me when I held my breath too long. I wanted that wood floor, that fall, that wet, freshly cut lawn. I need to wake up. I wonder where my father will be buried, next to the grave that is my name, next to his father who has a place. The gulls in Michigan City scream like they know all the answers. They have the keys to every prison in town. All right, this next poem also touches upon one of the threads in the book. I thought I would pick poems that kind of showed you guys the variety of like kind of threads or research that I did to write the book. One of my chapbooks is called Never Leave the Foot of an Animal Unskinned, and it's from when I took a material culture theory class in my MFA and did a poetry project on taxidermy, which obviously is a very popular thing in the Upper Peninsula, but it also is a really kind of fascinating idea that you take a thing that is dead and then you try to make it look as alive as possible, and kind of what that means about longing and desire and a lot of other kind of really weird things. So there are a few kind of taxidermy poems in the book. And this one is about a kind of recent resurgence of women who are participating in taxidermy, which is very much not something that has traditionally been done. This is called Bad Hunter. At the Taxidermy World Championships in Missouri, women flock around like smart pink birds. They comb their small foxes with toothbrushes and preen the wings of swallows. Men wearing leaves chew on toothpicks. Women with sharp bangs and blue glasses pull at the lips of a white-tailed deer. One paints the tongue of a rat a sweet blushy rose. The mounted heads of bucks are lined in neat rows like an army. The judges wear thin glasses and flash bright little lights. This is how wet the nose should be. This is how cocked the hoof. A girl dusts paint flecks off of her roadkill beaver. A boy licks a pearl of blood from his thumb. All right. This next poem is called Grasp. I don't think it really needs much of an explanation. I learned the word for willow tree. I learned the word for howl and keep it in my throat. The word for wolf curls underneath my tongue. I have studied pain this way, tucking it into the folds of my body where darkness settles. I wonder about the waking. The sun-split morning burns into orange peel. dappled heat. An extinct volcano comes back to life, but we aren't told how we know the mountain has begun to stir, how stone yawns and spins hot into the world again. I wish that I could say I saved the mourning dove, but I can't be sure. Every bird dies a death, falls from the sky and sleeps. It is hard to banish this thought that everything wakes up and waits for living, for the word that names the blue color of a pale vein. Who wouldn't want to wake an ancient thing from the deepest sleep? Who wouldn't want to dig and find the still wet blood of a long dead fawn? A miracle, maybe, how the earth shudders beneath us, how we dance along the fractures. This next poem is called In Praise of the Exoskeleton. Again, this kind of idea that I felt like when I lived in the Upper Peninsula, I had to make myself resistant and a little bit hardened to not only the people around me, but the land as well. In praise of the exoskeleton, the ability to stay entirely untouched, unscavenged, unhaunted by the other bodies inside your own. Once, pavement split me right down the middle. I learned my blood and it spread, the lengths my skin went to in its healing, the way I lost and came back, bright, pink, new. When men tell me what to think of my body, I pull my bones around me like a slick jacket of white, harder this way, rigid and resistant, ready for rocks. There are mechanics to this method, to becoming a shell and staying soft underneath. There's failure too, in the scales I develop in direct sunlight, in the cracks that let the light in, the super glue that won't hold me. The doctor told me I will never grow taller, and I said, that's fine. People always see me as taller than I am. I am elastic energy. When you're not looking, I'm a swarm of locusts. When you touch me, it sounds like thunder. All right, I have just a few more poems and then this kind of longer prose poem as well. My cat has come to sprawl next to me. So this is the kind of longer prose poem or kind of lyric essay that I felt very much fit into the book. Even some of the lines kind of echo other lines that are in the poems as well. So I feel like it serves as this kind of central moment in the book where I was kind of contemplating, what led me to this place and kind of my journey there. And then also this interaction that I had with this man while I worked at a retail store. Okay, so this is called The Lizard That Lived Forever. I hate to say that I dream about men, but I do. About men who have gone off and married other girls, moved to other colonial houses in Virginia. It is like strapping the tree branch to my bicycle and riding until I become concrete. Monday drew a circle around me and lit it on fire. Wednesday learned my name and spit it onto my lap. I scrub an opal earring with a wire brush and it turns to gold in my hands. I have dug it out of a dead woman's pink jewelry box. I was born in October and I feel like I need to polish all of the opals that ever existed. This morning, a man walks into the store where I work and tells me he is an ordained minister. He asks to see an antique straight razor and cradles the carved handle in his hands like a small bird. The truth is, my sister will not feed the pet lizards so the crickets jump around our house like small flickers of light. They sing to each other. The lizard jumps from our palms as though she has never been afraid. When she dies, she curls under a rock and turns to dust. We bury her in the backyard as though we loved her. When the man at the store tells me what he thinks of my body, I want to tell him that I haven't been touched in 3 years. Maybe I am lying. Maybe this is the struggle he speaks of. I think about my sister's lizard, how we named her a name I don't remember. I think about how she lived longer than all the other lizards. I think about the strange scars left behind on my body. their pale and vicious takeover. The part I do remember, applying medicine every night, peeling off the scab in the morning, and doing it all over again and again. I see the man again, and this time I shrink into a hummingbird. I try to laugh at his jokes and show my teeth. What he doesn't know is that I feel all the poison. I smell it on his skin, on his scabby arms. His combat boots are laced tight and tall as though they have never left his feet. Maybe a stranger is someone I have never met. Maybe he takes a picture of me without my permission. Maybe he is 5 beers deep and reeks of smoke. Maybe a stranger owns my body in some sick and unfair way. He knows what will make me move down the bar. He knows what will make me shift in my seat until my dress becomes a chrysalis. This is to say, I have never forgiven myself for the times I smiled when I should have screamed, for the men who asked when they knew the answer. The last time I saw you, I ran through the parking lot like a deer caught in the line of fire. Of course, I could just take the blindfold off. Of course, I could just let you shoot me and it'd all be over. Before the overgrown lawn, before the man, before all the men, before I buried my trust in the sea, before I ate a fig for the first time and it felt like a universe found its way into my mouth. I never knew survival like that, how to say thank you, but with needles in your teeth. In the end, all dust, the lizard, the rusty razor blade. We have all known too many cheeks. We have all known too many men who will tell us what they think without caring at all. I will never forget what you said to me when you left. You begged me to stop speaking. You begged me to stop saying your name. This next poem is called Renovation. This time we say rally, rally, win. We condition the leather until supple. We talk about the men we have lost as if they have never been anything but lucky to touch us. It's like this. The orange peel's gone limp in the yard. The glasses old and sticky in the sink. The wallpaper peeling like a snake. Good grief, the guns in the closet are dusty and bulletless. Good grief, the inside is made of oil and liquor. When the chalkboard turns into a dark swarm of wasps, I have forgotten how my name denies my body like water and butter, the beads of yellow lifting to the surface like small stubborn suns. I only have 3 poems left that I'll read, and we're into the 4th section of the book as well, kind of where I begin to kind of accept the things that I did kind of appreciate or kind of carry with me as I left the UP or as I prepared to leave. This first poem in this 4th section, well, I guess it's technically the 2nd poem, it's after the last wolf question, is called Call Me a Courage. I want to name all the birds, to identify kingdom and phylum and order, a taxonomy of beaked jaws, hard shells, feathers. I forget sometimes that we name everything that bleeds. I want to categorize their clumsy syllables, know them by their candy-colored wings, the soft nakedness of their feet. I want to call out to them, each one by its name, as though I had known it all along. In the museum diorama, their bodies are mid-flight, perched, diving into glass. Oh, those 4-chambered hearts, the hollow bones of flightless deaths. Funny how we strive to name a prowl of jaguars, a streak of tigers, how we name companionship as though it is something surprising to want, to need. A brash of deer lingers in the dew-wet lawn of my childhood home, chewing clover, blinking into the dense fog. I wonder, what would we name a group of me? 20 versions of my body shift in a field. My skin collects wetness at dawn. I'm skittish, maybe. I look for shelter. A dissimulation of birds watches from the tree line. A host of sparrows bursts from an oak in a splash of darkness. black-throated. Everyone looks beautiful in white, like doves, feathered romantic things. On my side of the glass, the creatures I see are always more frightening. Let's name us a murder, a courage, a loneliness. This next poem that I'll read is Origin of the Mapping System. My timer went off, so I'm in a good spot. I have one more poem after this. Origin of the Mapping System. I was potentially everything. A glass atlas, my legend bled dry with the clean cut of a knife. No, I have never scorched my body in search of warmth. I bury myself in sand, and it is everything I expect. I am filled. I find the grains later, and they are small planets I have taken and kept, polished slivers of quartz. My skin is a scavenger hunt, a map of where pain bloomed around me like milk, where I studied how my bones clicked, snapped. I loved a man. He made me a girl who listened well. All I wanted was the good and beautiful things I had heard about. And who could blame me? I wanted pleasure, to be touched in wet terrestrial places. I wanted to loosen into bright shards of earth. Once I pretended that I wore a crown of opals, of the richest dirt-sweet soil. And then this last poem is the last poem in the book. And this is called Bramble and Knife. Never mind the string of lights that died before all the others. Never mind the last white wolf in Yellowstone limping red through the dense night. No one can ever tell me this is fate. How everything goes about dying like it does. How the goat's eyes flicker in sweet quadrilaterals before the knife chomps its teeth metallic. When a boy jumps from a bridge in my hometown, his face looks like my young grandfather or my never-born brother. My sister skips another funeral of a friend gone missing. She polishes the glass in her sink until her skin glares red. Listen, I am drawing diagrams of the frostbitten grass, of the small untouched bodies of birds. In some other life, I am breathing and my heart does not skip in my throat like a river-worn stone. So thank you. I started stumbling over my words in those last two poems, so it's probably good that I end there. So yeah, as Nate said, I'm willing to take questions if anyone has any. It's late in Lubbock too, so it's 10:37, so that's maybe also why I'm like stumbling over my words. But I don't know, Nate, how you would like me to take questions or if I can see them at any point, but.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Sarah. That was really, really terrific. I'm greatly appreciative to you for your work and for your time tonight. We do have a few people in the room, so please don't be shy if you have questions or thoughts for the writer. And if you're listening online, if you're tuning in, I have the spreadsheet open here, so please don't hesitate to submit questions and I can relay them to the author. But maybe Sarah, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of prime the pump a little bit with a couple of thoughts that I have in response to your reading. The first question that I have, this is really open-ended, but I guess I just wonder about some of your thoughts about your process and your life as a poet. I think that sometimes we get the idea, like for those of us who aren't writing poetry, we might think about poets as like people who go out into the world, they have experiences and observations, and they take those home, sit down and like spend, months or years like writing a collection of poetry before it is revealed to the world and published in between the covers of a book. But from your profile, I think it's just really clear that you're extremely active as a poet. I think you're really widely published in journals, and you've won contests, including this one, including the Permafrost Prize. And I guess what that suggests to me, what the challenge that represents to maybe some of the stereotypes that I mentioned, is that it seems like your life and your work is much more iterative and dynamic, maybe. And so I wonder if you have thoughts about that about your lifestyle as a poet and your experience as a poet, and maybe whether that informs your actual work and informs your writing. That's the question. I don't know if you have thoughts about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think that yes, I am like a prolific poet. Like I write a lot. Not most recently because I had to read like so much for my qualifying exams, but yeah, I write a lot, and I also I obviously ended up in a similarly isolated location as the Upper Peninsula, and I found even though so much of again what you said, like poets, they go out in the world and they experience things, and then they write poems about it. While so much of my process is partly that, a lot of it was me kind of like sitting by myself in a coffee shop when it like snowed 7 feet the day before, and just kind of thinking about like meditatively the world around me, and that's kind of where a lot of my generative writing was coming from, was these very more introspective moments, because it was really hard for me to get out of the Upper Peninsula at the time. It was hard for me to go out and see the world. Like Chicago was the closest large city, and it was 6 hours away. Green Bay I don't think really counts, and that was maybe like 3 or 4 hours away. So we were definitely in a really isolated location, and that kind of forced my process to change a lot, from when I lived in Miami and was, going shopping or going out or going to the beach. And while doing all of those things was great, I felt like I actually didn't have as much to write about, because I was busy living and hanging out with my friends and like doing fun stuff. And so that's why I chose to come to Lubbock, which is bigger than the Upper Peninsula, or Marquette, Michigan, but it is 5 or 6 hours away from literally any big city. And yeah, so I feel like my process is really introspective, but I also am not the kind of person who writes every day. I write when I feel like writing, and I think that's that kind of unencumbered feeling of writing, or not feeling like it's a chore or a thing, oh, I have to hit a word count or a requirement, does make my writing come a little bit more easily. If we want to get technical with it, I write like directly into my computer and like write a poem. And I have some friends who make fun of me. I like will write a poem and I'll like read it through a couple of times, then I'll be like, time to send it out. So I'm definitely the kind of person who thinks a lot about a poem, and again, doesn't write every day. I write down a couple of notes maybe, and then the poem kind of comes out often fully formed. Though I do love revision, it's not necessarily something I tackle until I begin to form a collection. Like right now, I'm working on a collection similarly about place, but about living here in Lubbock, Texas, which is a very different but similar experience to living in the UP. And especially during like a pandemic, where many people were already feeling isolated, but then also feeling isolated in this kind of space. And yeah, I mean, the beginning of summer, I was writing 2 or 3 poems a day, and now I haven't written a poem in like a month. So so it very much varies. I don't know if that really answers your question, but yeah, that's kind of like my, I guess, process.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks. That's interesting. The muse comes and goes, I think. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
so I also wonder, it's hard. I think it would be hard for anybody to come away from this collection not thinking about, I mean, you mentioned material culture and sort of physicality. Um, that, that taxidermy poem, Bed Hunter, is a knockout. I think I really like that. I personally, I think about like poetry's function as translating sort of our interior selves into our physical worlds and kind of vice versa. I think this is a book that does that perfectly. I wonder if you can remember a moment or an experience or even like a particular poem, when you felt like you made a decision to be such a like sensorially or physically minded poet. I think that seems like a distinguishing characteristic of your work.
Yeah, that's a good question as well. Um, I wonder if I could isolate like a specific moment, and it would probably be very early in my life. I started writing poetry when I was like 16. I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is very like creative, like hippie kind of town. And I was a slam poet at the time, but my teacher in high school was very formative. I even thank him in my acknowledgments, and he was like all about the sensory details and all about like the object and using the five senses to describe like the world around you. And that's something that just really became ingrained in who I was as a poet. I was one of the very few, again, I'm like in a PhD program, so obviously everyone around me is immensely talented and such terrific writers. But a lot of them came to writing and creative writing a little bit later in their lives. And I was like the weird 17-year-old applying for schools that had creative writing programs and was like, I need to be a creative writing major in undergrad. And so I think I had a lot of that connection to the object. You can even see in the space behind me, like I am a collector. I love to kind of allow objects to become a big part of my life. My parents say it's like hoarding, but I don't think it is. I think it's collecting. And it's also just become a really big part of my writing, not just in this book, but in a lot of my work after. The work that won like the Grist Pro Forma contest was like collage work where I, cut stuff out of magazines and printed off text and then re-put it into a computer. And so a lot of it was very material, very physical. And I agree that like, I don't think those things can really be, I don't know, separated in poems. Or if they are, it's because it's, telling a story or a narrative or something like that. But a lot of my poems, I think, very much fall into that lyric category, where they are very rooted in emotion and the object and the physicality of those two things kind of intermingling. But yeah, so I guess if I had to isolate like a time, it would be, 16 years old, just moved to Michigan from Illinois, took a poetry class. I think we even had to like bring an object in one day and then like we traded them around and had to like write about those objects. And so I think that that's something that really spilled into my own interests and then was rekindled when I took that material culture class, and now has become a larger part of my own kind of current work, which very much marries prose, poetry, and as well as image and the kind of physicality of an image, and the interaction between illustration and text and art and photography as well. So I don't know if that, I also don't know if that answers your question. I was like rambling, but yeah.
Yeah, it did, absolutely. Thank you. And it actually provides kind of a pretty good segue into my third question, my last question. Um, it's about the cover art of the book. Um, and I guess also like sort of larger than that. So it's very striking cover. We're proud of it at UA Press, and I think that you're happy with it too. Hanali Joshi, I think, is the name of the artist. But looking at the cover art and also like reading the epigraphs in the book that sort of appear at the beginning of each section, I mean, it it definitely feels like a very personal collection of poetry, but it also feels like it's sort of in conversation with other artists and other writers. And Margaret Atwood is one, Cynthia Cruz Berry Lopez, who we know quite a lot about here in Alaska. I just wonder if you have any sort of thoughts about that idea of being in conversation with other poets and other authors and writers, because I think that that's a powerful idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love the cover as well. Like at UAP, it's Krista, who I worked with a ton, and I feel like I bothered her so much about my cover because I wanted it to be perfect. But I was so happy with how it turned out. And when I was talking to my dad about which image to choose, he was like, I love that these like two kind of faceless women are kind of running towards something or almost like taking you on this journey. And that's how I wanted the kind of sections in the book as they, again, kind of culminate in my acceptance or kind of the end of my journey in the Upper Peninsula. And I feel like that's how I was treating the epigraphs as well. I was thinking about, what was I reading as I was going through my MFA program, because I was in a very literary space, even though it was immersed in this kind of very again, like wild and isolated place that was covered in snow, 10 months out of the year, which I don't need to explain to you guys in Alaska. But yeah, and so I think that a lot of what I was reading was really influencing the things that I was writing about. And that continued when I came to Lubbock. Like I actually didn't know very much about Barry Lopez until I came to Lubbock, because he actually was I don't know if it was a professor emeritus or he would come to Lubbock every 2 years and do like a reading. And I encountered Of Wolves and Men at a library book sale, and there were like 6 copies of it because he would come here, every few years and read and sell his books. And so there were just so many copies like out there in the world in Lubbock. And so I became really inspired by the ways that, I was still feeling really connected to the Upper Peninsula, even as I was removed from it. And that's kind of what I was finding in a lot of the literature that I was reading, not only in the UP, but also here as well. I obviously quote as well, oh gosh, I think it's Women Who Run with Wolves. By Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And I like picked up that book at like a Goodwill in, Marquette, Michigan. And so it felt like, I don't know, like the place was asking me to write about these things or asking me to read about them. And that's kind of where a lot of my inspiration kind of came from. And I felt like I wanted to show what kind of had guided me through the time I was there. Because again, I felt very alone in person, but I felt very connected to literature while I was there and the books that I was reading, because there's not a lot else to do when you're snowed in and you have no shovel and and it's negative 15 degrees. So yeah, so that's kind of like I guess what drove a lot of my my reasoning behind the epigraphs, and then obviously too kind of being in Lubbock and searching for a piece of artwork that I felt like tugged at me in the same way that the kind of wild visual aspects of the Upper Peninsula tugged at me. And I felt very drawn to like, large swaths of ocean and or like lake and land and these kind of dark, moody colors. But I was really struck by how bright and wild this image was. And again, how it kind of felt like it was taking the reader along with it. So yeah.
Love that. Okay, great. Well, thanks. If we don't have any other takers here in the room or online, don't hesitate to contact us, to contact me at University of Alaska Press. If you have any further questions for us or for Sara. I want to thank Sara again for participating and sharing her work with us. It's really great. And I hope that if you don't have the book already, you'll find it online or here at our bookshop on campus at the Rasmussen Library. You can follow Sara on Twitter. Her handle is Sara Renee Ryan. Renee has 2 E's. You can follow us at UAlaska Press. And we have more Authors Corner presentations coming up for the rest of the summer on Monday nights. Thanks again to everybody in attendance. Thanks again to Sara, and yeah, have a great Monday night. Hope to see more of you for the rest of the summer here in Fairbanks.
Thank you so much for having me.